Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Brick Railway Builders podcast, a podcast all about Lego trains. This is an interview style podcast where I introduce everybody in the hobby to everyone. And my guest for me for this episode is someone I've been talking to for a good long while. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jonathan, ThatNiagaraGuy. Hello, how are you doing?
Hello, fine folks. Yeah, I've been doing pretty fine lately. Thank you for having me on this podcast. How you been?
I've been doing pretty good. It's been a bit of a slow day, but I do want to make a quick notice as well. Here in England, the traditional British weather of rain has started to come back. So if you can hear any rain in the background, I do apologise. But we're going to get straight on with the episode as always. So please introduce yourself.
Hi. Well, as Luke said, my name is Jonathan. I'm Mexican. I'm a Mexican railroader. Well, not truly a Mexican railroader. I like to say that I am. I have an insane passion towards my nation's history when it comes to railroading. It's very unique compared to other North American railroads. And yeah, basically, I do YouTube as a side hobby. I do model railroading and whatnot. And one thing I do also enjoy doing a lot is Lego railroading.
Okay, so what can you tell us about your current Lego train collection?
Well, to be completely honest, it's not that big due to the limiting budget. I only have about one locomotive and, as of right now, one fully built piece of rolling stock, which is quite old. I still need to rebuild it, and the engine that I have is a bit broken because I've been doing other models online. My main collection isn't in physical form, rather in digital form.
I do understand that your favorite locomotive kind of goes hand in hand with your username online, which is a Niagara, a specific locomotive.
To be fair, one thing that I've been telling people lately and that do shock them is the Niagara that I used to have basically got scrapped. And the reason that happened is because I started to grow tired of it, and actually, it isn't my favorite engine that I've built. Again, going back, my favorite engine as of right now is a Santa Fe Hudson 3460. As of right now, fully finished Mogs has to be my favorite, the Santa Fe Hudson. However, there is one engine that I'm working on that is growing up there in my list of favorite engines I've built, that being a Nacionales de Mexico QR1 484 Northern, which I do plan on the future, if my budget allows it, to buy the parts and building it in real life.
That's something that's been dawning on me a little bit more as well when you mentioned the budget side of things. I've had to put a bunch of projects back on the to build list because I thought to myself, right, I've actually been spending quite a lot of money on parts recently. I need to back it off a little bit too. So with some models I've been able to make recently, it's just been with whatever I've got. But it's that sort of temptation where I keep looking at my list in the Word document I've got here with other details on. I keep thinking, oh, I know how I want to make it, but I just can't do that yet.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Basically, there is hundreds of locomotives I want to build, but me deciding which one is always like a very tedious process, and I always usually go for the one that's just like at that time is my favorite engine that I like. I research a lot and investigate. I'm like, oh, it would be cool to have a model. And for example, the reason why I've been going for the Mexican engine is because I've been in a very, as I like to say, it's a high on Nacionales de Mexico. I've been very into it, and in fact, I've bought memorabilia from the railroad recently. I'm still waiting for it to arrive, of course. But I decided, you know what? Since there's no models of it, why don't I do it? And I decided to.
That's a really cool thing too, where I can't remember any particular models off the top of my head, but there are some like going on the Lego Rail Facebook group, for example, one of the many hubs online for Lego train fans. And every now and then you'll see a particular locomotive or a railway based model just appear, and it's the first Lego model of that particular locomotive or structure, and you think, ah, how come nobody's done that before? It looks actually really cool. So yeah, there were definitely loads of moments where you kind of recognize that something doesn't exist yet in brick form, and that's a great opportunity for you to do that. I remember, I think it was January 2020 when I started making 7 wide models, I hadn't seen anyone make an LNER W1 yet at that point, at least not posted online. So I made my one, I put it online, and it wasn't too long after where a bunch of other W1s started to appear. And I don't know, it was kind of a weird feeling. It was like, yes, I've somewhat popularized the introduction of the W1 into the Lego Train hobby. But yes, it's definitely a very cool feeling to pioneer a particular model into the hobby.
Honestly, I have to agree with you, of course, because as maybe some of you remember, or if you remember, look, when I made the original design of the Niagara, the one that was 10 wide, I still remember there was one engine, well, there was a model of the Niagara before, and it was digital. So I took the opportunity and I started to say to a lot of people that I met or people online, which are currently a lot of my friends, that I told them, hey, I'm the first person who has built a physical model of the New York Central's S1B Niagaras. But of course, I'm not gonna lie, the original design, as you have may guessed, it was a very poorly designed engine. It was out of scale, it bothered me, so I did the new one that a lot of people may remember, or not many people know of, probably. And by that point, there was already a guy in the Brick Model Railroader group who had built a Niagara that I looked at it and it was stunning and it surprised me. And I was just like, wow, this guy really took the crown for like the best Niagara out there because it was basically like kind of the only two that I've seen at least or have heard of that are physical models. Of course, there's probably hundreds of kids who have done, or hundreds of modelers who have done Niagaras before, but they haven't posted it online because they maybe don't find it comfortable. Basically, and my way that I function, like when I build models, is I'd rather do an engine that if I spend hours trying to find a model online, if I don't find anything, I usually build that because it's like I know that I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of self conscious sometimes when it comes to my models. That I feel kind of bad when I do one because like I have the engine and then I see somebody else who's like way better, and I'm like, oh wow, this one's better than mine, and I get disappointed on mine and I just move on. I mean, it may sound self conscious or it may sound selfish, but it's just I'd rather have an engine that almost nobody has heard of or nobody has done because that way I'm like, oh, I'm very proud of it. And if I see somebody else's model later on the road, I'm like, oh, that looks cool. I could improve upon it. Rather than while I'm building it, I see somebody else's new model and I'm like, oh, I already have all of this. Oh, geez, it basically I get tired of it very easily, basically. Which is why if you go on my Twitter page or YouTube or anything, if you know me close, you know that I've only done trains that nobody has done. For example, of a Southern Pacific tunnel motor, which was my first diesel engine that I've built in full scale, and it's one of my favorite models I've done so far because it's just amazing. As of that point, I had never seen anyone done it, and I was just like, oh, I guess I'll take the opportunity. Or going back, as of late, I've done 3 Mexican trains, and nobody has basically done Mexican steam locomotives. They have done, I believe, one. And when it comes to diesel engines, there's hundreds, I feel like. But when it comes to steam engines, I've built two, and those were basically the only ones out there.
Yeah, I was just trying to think about what models I've made, if there were any, where outside of the W1, where there were other cases of, has anybody else built this before? And it's definitely been a case of, I wonder if there's like half a dozen or so of them out there, but the people who have made them just haven't posted them online. There's plenty of people who are in the hobby that don't really care for putting anything online or social media as a whole for that matter. I think you're right when you said, it's a bit more self-conscious because there's that little side of, well, with me at least, because let's use the Thomas models for example, because I've made Thomas characters for a few years and there's just an explosion of Lego Thomas characters out there now. There's definitely this sort of small side of me that goes, okay, how did this person build theirs? How did this person build this sort of section for that character? And there's definitely a number of models that I have made that I wish I could remake into a different model today. Like same character, but different size. Like Henry, for example. For the longest time, I said I would love to rebuild Henry with slightly larger drive wheels. I've made models at 8 studs wide. I'm comfortable with building models at 8 studs wide, so that's something else I would love to do too. but it's a matter of being able to afford the parts, getting them all in, having to rebuild the model, which means getting rid of some of the trimline tape potentially. But it's also a fact of I know I'm going to like the end result, but there's still that side of me that thinks, oh, I just love how this builder was able to accomplish this detail. I wish I thought to do that. So yeah, it's definitely a bit of again, I can see what you mean when it comes to the sort of selfishness, but it's just that bit where you're just in awe of some of the details that someone else has made, and that sort of area is what builds up other people's models in the hobby as a whole.
I again, it's a matter of if I see an engine that somebody already has built and I am building it at the same time, like they already have finished it, I'm like, geez, I really want to build this, but they've done so better, and I already have, for example, like the boiler or whatever, and I'm like, I could improve upon this and improve upon that, and from experience, trust me, I've tried to do that, but I never finish the engine, and it always sits dormant on like a drawer or in my desk, piling dust. But when somebody hasn't done it, I'm like, oh, I could see what I can do. And when, for example, going back to the Santa Fe Hudson, when I was building it, I was just like, this is going to be one of my most detailed engines, which it is as of right now, that is fully finished. And it's just I've done so many techniques for that engine that I've never done before that it's just I'm so proud of it. And when I saw people, for example, you and somebody else who did a Blue Goose, I don't quite remember who it was. When I saw those engines, I'm like, oh wow, they look amazing. Those are incredible models. I see them and I'm like, wow. But and then I feel like not self conscious, but I feel kind of proud of myself because people always see like not throwing shame or anything, of course. People always see the streamliner and like, oh, this looks more interesting, which it does. But when I see a Santa Fe engine, I mainly see the black and white front locomotives that you probably could find on the internet. When I see those, I'm like, those look interesting, and I want to do them, and that's why I could have gone for the Santa Fe Blue Goose, but I went for the non-streamlined variant because it looks so interesting to me, and plus I had already attempted to build it once a long, long time ago. I never finished it, but I always wanted to do it again, and I did. I gotta say, I'm very proud of myself because it's an amazing model.
So yeah, the other guy, just to quickly go back to that, the other guy who made the Blue Goose model that you mentioned a moment ago is Elijah Stewart. So shout out to Elijah for another beautiful model. So the question I'm now most keen to ask you, and one I continue to believe will have a different answer every single time, what is your ideal Lego train set?
So it may not be a shocker to most, in fact, maybe to you also, but though I have to say it's somewhat related to my own train. However, there is an idea that I've had. I've actually been thinking about it recently, and it's basically kind of inspired on how one of my favorite, or mainly just model train companies do it, is that they release a series of starter sets, which Lego could do. For example, like they could do, I don't know, an 040 or an 060 or a diesel engine, something simple to build that will get people into the hobby. And basically, it comes with a local track, maybe some accessories like a train crossing or whatever, but mainly just the loop of track, and that's it. And Lego could also do a basic line of, for example, they could sell a train station, a train crossing, switches, just like how they used to do before. And a thing that they could really do is that they could do like what they did with the Santa Fe Super Chief set back in I don't remember how what year it was, but they could sell the pieces of rolling stuff, for example, the coaches, the engines separately, and you could modify them and build them however you wanted, inspired upon what they give you. And they could do that so they could have like add-on cars, for example, like they could do a box car, a passenger train, maybe even a locomotive separately. And later down the line, they could also attempt. I maybe it could work, maybe it couldn't. Maybe a line of more realistic models that will cost an arm and a leg, of course, but they could be much realistic, and they you could use them for as a display piece, but you could also take them as a layout or whatnot. Like it could look just a more prototypical one-to-one scale, for example, of what they did with the crocodile, but definitely not like what they did for the Hope Express. Like they were on the right step, but they missed so many opportunities. But they were close, basically. Mainly just a starter set, and then separate sets where it's just add-ons that you could add to the train, and then you can build upon that. You know?
Yeah, so it's unsurprising that my own train got mentioned. And I think the Santa Fe Super Chief and that sort of line of sets was 2002, I want to say. It was definitely early 2000s. And I do think starter railway theme sets is the way to go. And they kind of got that in a sense. The City line definitely has a good number of train sets in them. The recent ones that came out in mid 2022 are quite nice looking. They've definitely got some vibrance and some modern takes to their designs. I'm very happy to see that they made their own train station set again. Like you mentioned, separate sets for tracks is again something that already exists. And I see that as more of the sort of middle. So you got beginner sets, intermediate sets, and expert sets. The City line
Yeah.
definitely fits in that sort of middle branch. There's lots going on there, but they're not the most detailed models ever. And the expert sets are things like Emerald Knight, Horizon Express, the Maersk train, the Crocodile locomotive from 2020, those sort of sets. So a series of smaller beginner sets would definitely be a good way to go. And it's never too late to give this a try, because going back to decades where, again, the Santa Fe Super Chief, when that was all a thing, there was definitely less market for Lego Railway stuff because that was 2 decades ago. Here we are today, where there's so many people building countless mocks for the Lego Railway scene, and a lot of us, myself being one of them, are really pushing to see proper Lego train sets again. So, yeah, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction where it's keeping things separate. People will know what they want, and bundling a bunch of things together into one set is going to be really difficult for what people would want. And it's definitely going to be frustrating if they have to buy a second one just to get a few more elements from a set, but also in turn means they have to buy more things that they don't want. A prime example of that is the Emerald Knight. People bought 5 Emerald Knight sets just to get another coach, which is, well, going back to 2009, 2010, this wasn't too much of a problem because the set was only £70. Nowadays, that's hell, but that's his own story altogether. But the point still stood where if you wanted a certain section of a set, not just railway stuff, but kind of just in general, if you wanted something in particular from a Lego set, it would either be you buy the set and accept the fact you don't want half the stuff that comes with it, or you just accept that, there is something to build and you go with that, or you just buy the parts separately online, which might even cost you the same amount as the set to begin with. I don't know. There's a couple of ways to go about it, but it's really the best thing to mimic what model train builders do, model railway companies, I should say, where they sell one coach on its own, they sell one locomotive on its own. If you're going to do Lego railways, Lego is a form of modeling after all. So for the railway scene,
Yeah.
why not copy that as well? Make a particular coach. It doesn't have to be the most detailed thing in the world. It really doesn't. There are countless mocks out there where people have shown their talents when it comes to putting plastic bricks together. Let them buy the set as a canvas. They can add to it, expand to it. It shouldn't be the most complicated thing ever. If you were to make a coach, for example, let's re release the Emerald Knight coach just as an arbitrary example. What that coach is, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect for what it is. If you want to double the length, make it wider, make it look like more of a British Railways Pullman coach, which is kind of the main inspiration, then the canvas is there. If you immediately straight away sold that as a twice as long, little bit wider, proper detail Pullman coach, that's going to be very intimidating for some people. It doesn't need to be so much. We just need options.
Yeah, basically, I have to agree with what you're saying because it's the way I see it is that you don't have to appeal a market of hypermodel railroaders like, oh, it must include the most finite detail. No, of course not. The way that I see that Lego could brand it is, it's just like, oh, you want a cheaper option for a train set inspired on something that your kid may like or that you may like. Oh, here you go. Oh, and an added feature, you can build it however you want. Like, you don't have to do something hyper realistic, you could do something quite simple. That way that like if a kid gets it, they're like, oh, I could build it how it is and expand upon it, or I could build it the way I want it. Because, for example, I when I was younger, I remember, I don't know if you remember that bullet train that they released back in like 2015. I don't remember the one that is white and red, not the one that has like, well, not the first
Oh, it's
iteration
like
of
the
car seat,
red
like,
bullet train sort of thing, high speed passenger train.
yeah, those ones.
That was
I remember.
yes, that was Lego City 2010, the red one.
I remember very fondly. I used to get those trains, and I used to play with them a lot. But then I started to just like modify them. I started adding them like horns or whatever, and at the end of like a week or a month, you would see them like completely destroyed. But I would have built sets of coaches, steam locomotives, because it's like the opportunity of being able to do the trains that you want is always so important. Which I may say, model railroading don't have that. I mean, they do have that ability, but you're stuck with the engine that you get. Like you cannot modify them insanely because it's going to be very difficult. But with Lego, you can just destroy the engine and build whatever you want, which is one of the opportunities that Lego offers, and that they could take opportunity of to make train sets.
Yeah, definitely. And there's definitely the. I suppose it is kind of obvious in the sense that if you want it to be ultra realistic, you either need to have so much experience with the Lego models in the first place, having made mocks for a number of years, to be familiar with how to put, bricks together to be able to accomplish a certain detail. Or more so, and I think I've mentioned this a couple of times in the past, maybe on the podcast, and definitely in other projects in other areas, where if you want something so realistic, you may as well just have model trains to begin with. Lego isn't going to satisfy the ultra realistic people because the ultra realistic detail wanters are people who have been in the hobby for so long but have chose the Lego medium as their modeling aspect to begin with.
Yeah, basically. If you're looking for hyper realistic stuff, don't go for Lego because you need to be in the market or like, well, not be in the market, but be on the communities of having built model trains before. If you want hyper realistic and you're going for Lego, I think it's better that you have some experience. But if you're brand new to the Lego market but you want hyper realistic, I would recommend instead of going for Lego, go for a model train. Sometimes they can go for really cheap and be really helpful, because I've gotten several like train sets that are not hyper realistic but close enough to scale, and it's impressive seeing what they can fit in such a small model. And Lego is able to do that, but it sacrifices a lot of things, and it's quite difficult.
Yeah, definitely. There's this sort of understanding where if you're going to be doing something with Lego, you've already accepted and acknowledged that it's Lego. You've got loads of parts in preset shapes, so you're going to have to work with what you've got. So, do you have a favorite or standout Lego train builder that you are following online?
Yes. In fact, quite several of them actually. One of them, you already know him. He's Seth. Seth Briggs. I've, I've attempted way back when to build stuff that is British rolling stock and locomotive, and I never was able to continue it because I was never good at it. I will admit it. And when I saw Seth's stuff, they were just amazing. Like I was blown away, and like some of the stuff that he's made is just very impressive. Another person is shocker to almost no one is Tony Sava. As an American builder, I see what he has done, and they're very impressive. One thing I'd like to say about Tony Sava is that most of his older models still stand the ground nowadays. Like his first, I think it was a Reading and Northern 425. I believe it was a blue one. You compare it to a lot of models that you see nowadays, and it still stands the ground. Like it still looks pretty good. And then you got, of course, most of his modern locomotives, the Dreyfus Hudson, the T1, which, if I had the money, I want to get it. His GS4, his F7s, and whatnot. Like you see those, and you're like, it's the classic design of Lego, but it's realistic. Another person is, I want to say it's Mac Bricks, the guy who made a template styled train out of Lego.
Yes, I am familiar
He
with the model and I love that.
Yeah, as a person who knows or has played around with Lionel scale, as you know, back in the olden days, back in the early 1900s, Lionel used to do team play trains, and when I saw it in Lego form, I was out of words. Like, it was amazing looking. It looked incredible, and not only his team play trains, but also like the GS4 that he made, just an incredible model. Another modeler, in fact, kind of close to me. His name on YouTube is Insult to Injury. He makes a lot of American custom stuff. He makes them out of his fictional railroad, and the engines that he has done, I talked to him, and he has shown me the progress of them like being built, and it's just such an amazing modeler. Like, there's stuff that he has done that I never would have imagined to do. And another person, his name is, oh, well, he's also a friend of mine who's also on YouTube. His name is Tank Nerd. He has done a lot of locomotives that are just, they are amazing. They're beautiful engines. They are just incredible all out. Like, he has done multiple diesel units, multiple steam locomotives, and he has done certain things that I'll admit it, I'll never would have imagined that he would have, like, I would have never imagined to do on my own engines. And I have taken inspiration of his stuff. And it's just an incredible, both of them, like, they're probably going to be watching this. Just shout out to them. Like, they are amazing builders and amazing people to talk to. And they're great inspiration also. I think that's pretty much most of the modelers, including you, of course. Well, I've been a subscriber of you for like years now. I still remember the very early iterations of the Giants, in fact. And when you started to do British stock, it was just like, those look amazing. I want to do stuff, but I know I was never going to be able to because I'm not good with British stock. And seeing people, like, I see British locomotives, weirdly enough, more difficult to build than American engines, because American engines, you just, as one of my friends said, you just put random stuff on it and it looks good as long as it looks industrial. But British, you have to have a certain style and a certain finesse with the parts to make it look like the actual engine. Oh, I almost forgot. British Bricks, also a YouTuber I follow. His stuff is amazing. So yeah, those pretty much are the modelers I follow on YouTube and Instagram and whatnot.
Yeah, I think British Bricks. I'm gonna have to double check this, but I think the streak of his name being mentioned for every podcast so far is going strong. Definitely someone to continue to watch because his work is really cool. Shout out to Tank Nerd, who is a member of our Discord server. Also with Mac Bricks, with the tin plates, locomotive, and rolling stock he made. That's definitely one of those models where, like we mentioned earlier, I've not seen anybody else make a Lego tin plate train before. So it was very cool to see that stand out. It took a moment for me to kind of recognize that it was supposed to be that design. But when it clicked and realized, oh yeah, it's supposed to be a tin plate train, it was really, really funky. Also going to Tony Sava as well. He recently posted on Flickr and other social medias of something called the Texas Curve, where he took, I don't know how many straight tracks and just a tiny bit of natural flex between each track and made the biggest circle I've ever seen. So go to Tony Sava on Flickr, give it a look because it is incredible.
And before I forget, I almost forgot this other builder. Another close friend of mine, his name on YouTube is Battle604. He does such amazing American locomotives. Like, I don't know if you've heard of the locomotive. It's Norfolk and Western 475, or the one that is in Strasbourg. And if you've been on the recent circle of American railroading, you know that that engine got its smoke door destroyed in an incident. It was that one. He did that engine on Lego, and you see it, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. He is just such an inspiration to me. And one thing he has done is valve gear most of his locomotives. They just look incredible. That basically, I believe, most of the Lego builders I follow.
Yeah, just to say with that Strasbourg engine too, I remember, I think it was about 5 minutes after it happened, there was a video sort of highlight of that moment where it crashed into the crane in a couple of group chats and a bunch of, so it circled really quickly. I'm amazed at something. Yeah, it's not that devastating a crash, but seeing how quickly that got around the internet was quite surprising.
And the amount of memes, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the memes, they were amazingly done and very hilarious. Like, I wanted to do one, but I procrastinated and didn't do them, basically.
Also, as well, having mentioned British stuff a moment ago, it's weird in the sense that British models for a lot of people seem difficult. I don't know if it's because I'm British and I've been familiar with British rolling stock and locomotives my entire life. But, having seen how small they are, they got quite some detail. In some of the wagons, we have all the exposed sort of wiring and planks to keep some of it together in some ways. The locomotives, where they got a lot of style in them, they've definitely got the function there. But when people compare them to American engines, for example, American engines visually have the function over form, which is why you see so much greebling on them, so many moving parts and exposed details on them, and it's not painted up and stylized and streamlined in the same way British engines are. But, that's a real world thing. But when it translates to Lego models, it's weird to see how some people who at least aren't British struggle to make British models. And again, I don't know what it is exactly, because maybe it's, again, lack of familiarity, in the same sense where I very, very rarely build something that isn't British. Not too long ago, I completed a model of the Japanese National Railway D51, which, to those of you who know Thomas characters, it's basically the representation of Hero. And that's the fourth international model I've ever done. And I've definitely had this, I'm not sure what word to use, this sort of aura, let's say, where I look at a lot of international models, or not British models, basically, that I look at and go, I would love to try and do that one day, but because it's not something I've seen twice a day, or something like that, it's just that sort of intimidation to make me go, I'll probably leave that to someone else. Yeah, maybe it's a case of just lack of familiarity, because I can definitely understand that.
There is a lot of engines I want to do, but I feel like I'm not experienced enough, but I still want to attempt them.
Yeah, there's loads of stuff I wanted to attempt in the past. I remember when I basically opened up a new Word document, and for, I don't know, like 3 pages it turned into, like one page for locomotives I want to make, one page of rolling stock I'd want to make, and another page dedicated to layout updates. And just seeing how much was there, I thought, I'm never going to touch any of these. So whilst you've definitely got that feeling of, I wish I could make them, it's just so draining when the realization hits you and you basically just can't do it. But I think with this hobby, that's where you kind of rely, well, not so much rely on other people, but you kind of just pray other people make the model for you, basically.
Sometimes making a model is hard. Sometimes I'm not gonna lie, there is engines I've done which are just a direct copy of somebody else's model. For example, one that comes to my mind, well, comes to the top of my mind right now is the Mold King QJ. I did one a long time ago, and I just did it as a thing to like get it onto digital so I could buy the parts so it would be actually fully Lego. But it never ended up working, so I just gave up on it. It is quite common for me to also just copy sometimes a lot of models. I don't do them that often, but when I'm stuck in certain things, I do go into Google. I'm like, oh, let's see what people. Okay, that's how you do that, and just build upon that.
Well, there is a famous quote that says, great artists steal. So it's not unreasonable for you to look at another person's model and go, oh, I see how they've done that. Let me just tweak my model. Everybody's guilty of
Yeah,
it. Well, I've done it with. The only one that comes to mind is my streamlined coronation, because when I saw British Brick's model from years ago, I was able to figure out how he made his streamlined front end. So I used that method. When it comes to the other models I've made since, again, nothing stands out as a method that I have mimicked, but there's definitely a lot of easy to replicate methods. How to get a certain boiler shape, how to attach a couple of parts together to create a certain detail, that sort of thing. But nothing so much on the level as the coronation, where it's a full section just replicated. I don't think I've ever replicated an entire model either. I've definitely looked at other people's models for the inspiration, of course, because there are so many talented builders out there. But yeah, again, the coronation, because it's my favorite, it's my baby. I try to put the most into that. So seeing other people's ideas and tweaking it whenever I can, that's where it kind of mainly comes from. And here we are at the final question. What projects do you have in the works and what do you hope to build in the future?
Well, there is multiple projects I want to do. Going back, recall to something I said earlier. As I said, it's a Nacionales de Mexico QR1 Northern, and one that I've actually started to build. My end goal on that engine is, it's going to sound annoying to maybe some people, but what I want to do is, I want to build it in physical form and put so much effort into it so I could actually enter it into the Break Trade Awards next year. And after doing that, I also want to attempt to have a full set of rolling stock to go with it, like a full set of like Nacionales de Mexico passenger cars, or maybe even some freight cars. Another engine I want to do is a near again. I want to do a New York Central Niagara, but fully rebuilt to the new scale that I'm going for, which is officially like 148, and just do it as best as I can physically can do it. Another engine is one that I've wanted to do for so long, but I've never found blueprints of it. It's the Nevada Northern number 40. I've always loved that engine so much because it's a 460 10 wheeler, but it looks very industrial and very modern, and it's just a beautiful looking American engine. It's just I love it. Also, going back to international locomotives, I want to do. I think it's a Japanese C60. Another engine I want to do is one that I've seen and I've actually been inside of, and it's another Mexican engine, which is in my city. It's Nacionales de Mexico 754, and it's just a beautiful little 262. And I've always wanted to do it, but never gotten to do it. Basically, like never gotten around to do it, and I think that's pretty much it for locomotives. For rolling stock, freight cars, basically just I want to have like several locomotives with several freight cars so I can run them around like in a local track, or in the future if time allows it I want to go to like train shows and bring them out and just run them. Or I learned here in Mexico there's train shows as well, which I never would have imagined, because for those who know, Mexico does have a railroad culture, but it's not as big as, for example, in the UK or in the US. And when I learned that there was train shows, I wanted to go one, but time didn't allow it. And in the future, if I get to build the Nacionales de Mexico QR1, I want to take it to our show and put it in as a display to see, like, just to show to people, like, oh, hey, look, I've done an engine from our cities, from our homes. One thing that surprises me is that in Mexico, there is almost little to none models on said locomotives. There is quite a few, and when there are, a lot of people like they spend hours building them. I've actually seen one of them in person. There's people who put hours onto them, and they look amazing. Like they're incredible locomotives. And actually, fun fact: the one that I'm gonna build is one that I've actually seen in real life. If you go to my channel, you can see me walking around it. It was from back. It was back in spring this year when I went to see it, and it was amazing to go see it. Basically,
That's really cool. That's really good to see and hear that your to build list is quite hefty. I think it's good to have a build list that long and not look at it and go, oh, I just can't build it all straight away, because you're not going to be able to build it all straight away. In time, you will eventually build up funds, build up parts, and be able to have the whole collection together. So I'm very, very keen to see what models you make in the future on that list. I was also quite excited when you said you're making something in preparation for the Brick Train Awards, which is something that a lot of people have definitely done. With the hundreds upon hundreds of submissions the Brick Train Awards get, it was really cool to see some of those posts that say, I've made this for the Brick Train Award. So it's definitely a big push to kind of get people modeling again. So it'll be, again, very cool to see if you'll be able to. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure you will be able to make it in time. But all the same, when you do make the model, I will be looking forward to seeing the pictures, basically.
again, it's probably going to be the same case as the original Niagara, like the first one that I've ever done. I don't think I've ever told you, but it was done for the community challenge. Like, I was gonna do it anyways, but when I noticed it was for the community challenge, I was like, oh, let's do it for that. I was gonna take my time, but I knew it was never gonna be finished. And when I did, I was just like, huh, so this is what building trains is. And yeah, I was just like, I'm gonna do it for the community challenge. And after I was finished, I just felt very proud of myself because I showed it to family members, and they're like, "Oh wow, you did that! Congratulations, my dear son!" And I'm like, "Thank you, father."
And that will wrap it up for this episode of the Brick Railway Builders podcast. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. If I may, of course, one final thing. I just wanted to say thank you for everyone who's watching. Hello to my close friends, and if I may, of course, if it's okay, I advertise something.
Yeah, please do.
It's a game in Roblox that I want to say I collaborate with. It's a game called Global Rails Revolution. It's a passion project from another friend, and it's near the end of its lifetime. Like, it's going to be scrapped. We don't know when, but who knows? We don't know. It's just going to be the final update this year is going to be happening, and if anyone can go play it, because it would be most meaningful thing for us because we've put many hours into it, and unfortunately, not many people play it. And since it's our final update, please take the opportunity to visit the game for like we stopped updating it. But yeah, I'll also join our group. It's called Nebula Studios, where you can probably see me also there. I'm an administrator and a developer, and that's a developer technically. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, go subscribe to Luke. He's an amazing YouTuber if you haven't, of course. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
I will make sure to leave a link to the video game in the description, as well as all of these social media pages that Niagara Guy has. And we will BRB with more BRBs. Thank you all ever so much for listening, and I shall see you all in the next episode. Bye bye.
Bye bye, folks.